Cora Ogden. Moved here to the Triangle about 5 years ago. I've been an artist for quite a few years, for many years now actually. It's a little scary. But we moved here from Connecticut, and I wasn't too sure how it was going to go, because I was so used to the beautiful Connecticut scenery and painting, but it's gone very well. First of all, there is the North Carolina shoreline that is gorgeous, and the mountains. And found a great gallery, Bev's Fine Art, who has been very supportive, the people at Bev's, and I just, I think it's been a good thing for my work. I have the flexibility to experiment a little, again, with the gallery is very supportive of that, and that's a good thing. So I announced at the dinner table one night that I was going to become a fine arts major. It was a very quiet supper after that. But that's what I did, and never looked back. It was wonderful. It took me an extra year to get out of there, the Bachelor of Fine Arts in Painting. And then I went to New Mexico, Albuquerque, and got a degree in sculpture, because I used increasingly less paint. And my canvases started coming off the wall, so to speak, and they said, well, we just can't work with you. You've got to go over to the sculpture department. So I did. Very much a colorist, and I very much want the person to enter into my painting. Wow. It's very important to me to have dimension in my canvases. Again, it's another device to pull the viewer into the canvas, to make them feel the moment. Right. So I'm constantly looking when I'm going around, and thank goodness for smartphones. I'm now out there clicking away like crazy. And some of the stuff I just discard, some of the imagery, some I keep and go, you know. In fact, there are times, especially when I lived up in the greater New York area, I'd go to the big flower shops in Manhattan, and I'd go to the big produce areas and just sort of wander around and look for, you know, what looks interesting. And so I'll take pictures of all different angles and close-ups and far away and reset the scene, so that ultimately I have a really good three-dimensional depiction of the idea that I'm trying to get across. Every studio I've ever had always has what I call a thinking table. And this is where I put images out that I'm sort of thinking about and trying to decide, and they percolate in my mind. You know, I walk past, I'm aware of them, and it's just back there churning away. And sometimes it'll take a few years for an image for me to resolve the problems set up in the image. And I also keep notebooks of fun things that I've seen, images like, this is a cool image. These images will trigger an idea, the seed, that then I will build upon. So I've got all of this. I have an image, actually, with the painting I'm working on right now, I have various images. I blow them up so I'm not working from a 4x6. And I start drawing it out on the canvas. So I do the grisaille painting and rub out areas where the highlights are, and then I'll even come back in white and get the pops. And that's where I began with that. And I call it the magic moment, because very quickly you can have the whole image revealed to you, you know, and it's the moment of possibility. Everything is possible then. And then you go through the slogging part where you start putting on the color, and sometimes it's really depressing because you sort of lose that wonderful possibility for a little while, and you have the middle ground where you're doing this and you're working away and putting on the color and correcting perspective and all this stuff. Then you get to the end and it all comes back again to the fun part, because every stroke you make is really having an impact. Never lay down a stroke just to put a stroke down. Always make the stroke be descriptive, never go off and have it be a stroke that can stand on its own, as opposed to just slapping some paint on there. No, I'll come back to that later. And the other thing is never try to, always resolve to come back tomorrow and paint better, paint the object better than you did today. In other words, don't try to finish it all that moment. Well, I love being outdoors, and I grew up going to the beach. I grew up being outside all the time as a child. I'm a gardener. Nature is very important to me. It's a spiritual thing also. I initially started doing still lifes, and that was kind of my base. Still lifes, and then I put a window in a still life one day with a little view out the window, and pretty soon the window became bigger, and then it became a door, and one day I actually stepped outside and poof, I had created a landscape. Pretty much never looked back. I want people to, just as I want them with my still lifes, to feel that they've walked past that table and to pick the object up. It's a narrative. Somebody just left. They were looking at a book. They left. In the landscapes, I want people to stand there with me on the edge of this woodland pool. Kind of go into that quiet time. That, it's 10 degrees cooler than it is out in the meadow beyond this. And as they look at it, ask the question, well, gee, I wonder where this path goes. Wonder what's over there, or there's a little bit of maybe this was an old farm, an abandoned farm. So create their own story from perhaps memories that they have that are half forgotten. And so that's the kind of connection I want to make with people with my still lifes, with my landscapes, and my still lifes too, actually. White area, so a sketch probably also different ways
Okay, I'm Natalie, and I'm an artist, a painter, and I have 2 teenagers, and I'm a husband, and live in Greensboro, and I have a cat who is upstairs with my kids, because that's better than him being all over me right now. I paint abstract landscapes, and I like to use bright colors. Well, I knew I was an artist when I was probably a child, because everyone said I was. My parents probably mostly would say, "Oh, you're such an artist, you're such a good artist," and that was great. Thanks, Mom and Dad, because that really helped me to build that identity in my mind. I didn't call myself an artist though until later, when I was a grown-up, painting paintings in galleries and selling them, because then I realized, hey, people are reacting to my art and they like it and they want to live with it. So that made me feel like actually a real artist then. So, I started out wanting to do medical illustration, and I guess I thought it would be a piece of cake for me to get into one of the 4 graduate schools that they had for that. And so I only applied to one time, and I didn't get in. So I was a senior in college and engaged, so I just said, oh well, I'll just get married. And that was okay at the time. And I was just a secretary for a while. I did hand-painted furniture, and I worked at a hospital with occupational therapy and physical therapy as a technician. Decided I didn't like that, so I wanted to do art. And so a lot of times it was back and forth. So eventually I was able to go part-time with the hospital and paint again, and that was really good too. After we had kids, just stay home with them and then paint during nap times, and then when they were in school and things like that. And then they became, more independent, and I could paint a lot more, and so it's grown from there. So this is, like, I hate to say that I'm an artist. I had to say it because people say, now tell me you're an artist. And my dad's like, honey, I'm a painter, I paint the walls, you know, you're an artist. But I did have a lot of encouragement from my parents and from teachers, even peers throughout the years from being a child till, you know, college and beyond. I would do a lot of charcoal drawings. There's some on the wall like that, but charcoal drawings of classical paintings and drawings, just kind of copying what the old masters had done. From there, I started doing watercolors of simple still life setups. And they were like 6 by 6 inches, and they were like fruit and flowers, you know, the simple basic things. I call them vignettes because they were just like close-ups and, you know, pretty simple. And they started selling, and so I was able then to continue on that, and I started doing still lifes in oil, and then I started doing landscapes. I would go out and paint at the library downtown, not downtown, sorry, the library over there. It's got a lake. And it's got some trees, and it's just real pretty. Then, like, the economy went south. I guess it was about 2008, and so a lot of my galleries closed. I probably lost 2 to 4 galleries at least just that year, and but there were a couple galleries I was still in. And they said, well, bigger abstracts are selling. Have you ever considered doing abstracts? And I thought, no way. I would never even know how to start with an abstract. But one of those galleries actually was Bev's. And I was talking to Bev, and she says, have you ever considered doing that? I'm like, no. I think she said, why don't you try it or something? So I thought, what the heck? So I tried doing it, and I realized it was very difficult. I thought, you know, I kind of had almost a snobbery, an intellectual snobbery against abstracts, thinking, oh yeah, you just slap paint on the canvas like Jackson Pollock, just flick it on there and it's art. But that's not really how it is for the successful abstracts. You need to think about balance and edges and, you know, all the things that you need to think about in realism. Just apply them differently. I like to, I don't know, I bought some pastels a few years ago and started using those, and that was just wonderful because it was so easy. You didn't have to mix the colors, and but you just have to keep buying pastels. That's the only thing. I really enjoy doing I did enjoy doing some realistic studies with pastels, and also I do the pre-abstract studies with them too, because it's easy to just put them down and then I can paint over them or whatever. So yes, and also just the other day or the other month, I bought, what even are they? They're like sort of like fancy crayons. I thought I could draw on canvas with them. It didn't quite work out, but when I get a chance, I'm going to play with them on paper. But it's fun. I've had a few things that were really encouraging, that were things I like to post on social media. But and I did at one point think, oh yeah, I've made it as an artist, but you know, the moments pass, and you know, and then you go back to thinking, oh, you know, it's really kind of cyclical, because you think, I've really made it as an artist, I'm great, you know, and then something will happen like, well, maybe I'm not so great, oh, maybe I'm a terrible artist, oh, maybe I'm a good artist, oh, I'm great. You know, I saw that, you know, somewhere, and that's really how my thought process goes sometimes, because you see how you're doing in painting is how you are, you know, your value, which I don't know, that's a little off, but I'm really heavily dependent on photography. So I need to have a photo that I can think about a long time. Sometimes I'll think about it, put it aside, look at another one, have several going at once. But sometimes I combine them with other photographs. And so I can't really do that on location. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to do that yet. Well, I do use a little bit of emotion when selecting a photograph, and that's how I start. I look at a photograph, and that really is what begins the like being inspired. Also, just a feel for, or an idea in my head where I think that I can turn this into something where I can really say something that I want to say. Once I have the pastel study, I just copy it on canvas. So the actual painting is just copying the pastel study. Oh, dirty secret. A lot of times I'll see colors that I do like and I want to use them, but the thing that rules my color choice more than anything is the value, how light or dark the colors are. Because again, the pattern of light and dark is probably the most important thing to me. So I don't know, I mean, I just love to be outside in nature. I love the sun and beautiful green things, and I just, I'll take painting breaks outside. Oh, well, it's a job. Some people, I think, assume that it's all fun because painting is a hobby for some people. And you do it when you feel creative and, it's mysterious. But no, it's a job, and it gets tiring sometimes, it gets boring sometimes. And when it gets challenging, sometimes it is fun, but when it gets challenging, I just take a lot of breaks and I drink a lot of coffee. My cat. My cat thinks this is his room. I think he's mad that I'm sitting in his chair.
This panel sitting around for a couple of minutes. And I knew I needed to paint something vertical on it. I think for me, was when I first started getting some local recognition, entered a show, won an award or whatever. And I think when I started, my ego was maybe taking off too quickly. And, I was fairly judgmental about my own paintings, other people's paintings. And I think it was a difficult lesson because I think it oriented me to paint certain things. Who was I painting for? It wasn't myself. I always had to make, what do other people think of my paintings? And I've evolved into not caring at all about any of that, and that's why it's kind of, a lot of people ask me, do you know this artist and that artist? It's not, I do know a lot of artists, but I kind of almost don't want to know what anybody else is doing or whatever. And I think that was the hard part, was letting the ego go. And I think when you start painting, you just want to be so good, so quick. You want people to recognize you, so you get caught up. And oddly enough, as you become more renowned later, or at least in my case, I care less and less, even about the outcome of my own pieces, which is a blessing in disguise, actually. The truth is, I've done a lot of hard work to get where I am today. And I feel confident when I go to the canvas that it will evolve into something that I may or might not like, but the process of it is is what I'm proud of, and that I'm more in control. But I have to say, to get there, I had to study classically with other painters. And I didn't skip that process. I actually learned a lot through going to, taking from other great, wonderful artists, and taking all those things and all the influences I see and things I look out the window and beach and whatever, and to be able to incorporate that into a painting that's meaningful to me or somebody else. I think, I don't know if it's my proudest achievement. I think it's, something I feel good about, and now I feel also that I've let go of the need to win awards or do this or that or be, although on the other hand, make a living as an artist, you can't let go of everything. But this year, I became a signature member of the American Impressionist Society. I'm really proud that I get my work around nationally into these juried shows, and that's from a lot of hard work, and it didn't come by accident or serendipitously. Because I live in a world of constant interruptions, kind of like a lot of people do today. Although I do often paint at night. I'm not a morning painter, probably because things do quiet down a little bit. So the way I get my inspiration, my creative inspiration, is one of the things I do is I do a lot of photography. I love photography, and as well as doing plein air painting and painting from live models. You have to do that to be a painter. If you're going to paint realism, you have to paint from life. But in order to create the kind of paintings that I like, I have to have a large library of photographs, which I have from obviously beach people to Europe or wherever. I tend to like street scenes, city scenes, cafe scenes, and people scenes, as we talked about before. And obviously I compile I mean, I'm talking thousands of photographs that are my inspiration. Maybe I saw some really cool lighting, a really cool shadow that came across somebody. Some of my greatest inspirations is I go to the beach, I just sit there in a chair and I just watch people go by, surfers, girls, guys, whatever, people going in the water. And my problem is I see so many paintings everywhere in my head. It's almost like I'm overly stimulated and overly overwhelmed. That's what I can't turn off. And that can also be paralyzing, because when you see everything through the eyes of a painter, it's like, okay, what am I going to do next? And usually what motivates me to go to really hone down and get to it is having a deadline. It could be a self-imposed deadline or whatever, but having helps me, forces me to maybe take, my scattered thoughts focus, because something has to be done by that date, even if it doesn't have to be. Once I actually start the painting, well, first of all, I'm painting it in my head, sometimes for years before I even get around to painting it. But once I start painting it, I do go into a zone where I can't even describe what that zone is. It's a zone where I'm in the moment. It's a good zone to be in. It's like meditation, actually. And that's when things just sort of happen the way they're meant to be. So doing beach people, the lighting is really important on the person on the beach. So that's the first thing that interests me. And I often walk around the person or snap really quickly as they walk by and hope, my photos are somewhat in focus. But what really attracts me to the beach people is that the people on the beach are in the moment, not thinking about stresses and worries. They are ready to go in the water. They're probably at the happiest that they could be that day. And I think they elicit great body language just in the way they walk to the beach. They can be, all body shapes and sizes, and beautiful. One of the things that attracts me to painting beach people is watching people in all ages and groups. When they get down to the beach, or when anybody's on the beach, it's like everybody's worries and stresses disappear, and it's watching people just living just in that spontaneous moment. And it's people going in the water. I love to see bodies in the water, people walking on the beach or getting ready to go in the water. And I just believe it's the body language, it's all about their bodies, because they're on the beach and they're in bathing suits. So it's a great way to do figurative painting. Because they're not posing is actually the big advantage. And as I said, nobody knows I'm taking their picture. I am the invisible woman, thank God. Okay, so that's to my advantage, because I don't want people to know their picture's taking. Otherwise, that natural, pure look, attitude, or whatever isn't real. It's fake. So for me, it's like capturing just the pure moment. Okay, so that's what attracts me to it. In the terms of the process of the painting, I have so many pictures. So in the case of the girl with the orange skirt, I happen to have this panel, and I was thinking, okay, I'd like to paint something on that panel. What's the perfect, composition for it? And I was like, the girl with the orange skirt, because I have all those photos that are in my head that I've taken over the years. So in her case, I watched her walk, from the top of the beach down towards the water, and I thought, ching, 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 because she was just perfect. And then in that one moment, she just turned, and she wasn't looking at me, she was looking past me, but I just got that wonderful twist of her body that's so subtle but says so much. And so in terms of painting it, I like to keep my colors harmonized, so it's either more of a cool painting with some hot spots, or more of a warm painting with cool spots. Beach pieces tend to be more cool with hot spots. Really work on what's in focus and what's not. So the most, what's in focus the most is actually her hand and her her sandals, and then you go up her arm. The light, I love backlighting. And lighting is real important, which I should get, of course it's one of the most important things that I'm looking at. I rarely photograph people head on in lighting, usually behind them because I like the backlight. But the beautiful rim lighting, and then again, her face, if you come up close to it, almost has no detail in it. It's really abstracted, and I was just lucky it worked, because it's so easy not to work, and not overpainting it. I loved, the contrast of her blue and her skirt, and having her just kind of disappear into the water. That's stuff that I think about. I think about that a lot. I think about these edges and not having this typical blue sky. I mean, I don't know, that's like a yellow-gray sky, but yet you don't look at it and say, oh, that's an ugly sky. It just, and oddly enough, if you took a little color picker out, you'd see that many of my colors are extremely gray. They're not, so it's really weird because a lot of people look at my painting and say, oh, I love your colors. And I say, there's an awful lot of gray in there. You just can't, and then I take a little square out and, show them, look how gray that is. But, so my process is I do a drawing to get them, on the canvas. I have to get structure down. So I start structured. I'm not freewheeling it. I do sometimes, but not in this case. I must get her body position perfect. And I sometimes have to repaint it, redraw it, repaint it, because it cannot be wrong. The rest of it is hard. I don't want these things to compete with her. So I try to, and then even in the last minute, I thought, do I want people back in there? And I thought, you know what, I should put a little people in there. Why? I don't know, it's like an intuitive thing. And then I look and I say, is that work or not? And I thought, oh, just leave it. The hardest part is knowing when to stop. And sometimes it's someone else who has to tell me to stop. Okay, when is it finished? I mean, I could just keep going on it and wreck the whole thing, right? Like, especially doing her face. It's like, oh, I think I got enough of her face, that look, that attitude, with just a few brush strokes and values really close together. Boy, if I kept working on it, oh man, it would have just like been a failure. So, it's the process of putting it together that's really exciting. And suddenly, it looks terrible. A lot of my paintings look horrible. I don't like to tell people this. That's why I don't like people to look at my commissions. In the halfway mark, they're in a bad state. They're in a sorry state, and it's that last half of, and a lot of people don't finish their paintings halfway. It's that last stretch that you have to push yourself through to get through the problem solving, and that happens with every painting, even with her.
I think the question being asked, what do you do for a living, and saying I'm a painter would throw people off a little bit. So I had to explain what I painted, so I just narrowed it down to being an artist. And at first I was a little, cautious about that. I didn't want to seem arrogant about, yes, I'm an artist, but actually now I don't think of it so much in that terms. I think of it more as something, the way that I think, the way that I live, that everything in my life it comes out of my art. So my life is composed of things that make me an artist. So my initial inclination was not to be an artist. It was to study something related to sports and sports medicine, chiropractic, something like that. So I started school for that, and after a few years in, I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. I took some time off to think about what it was that I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and that time off really helped for me to make the decision to be an artist or to go to art school. The attempt to go to art school was really to see if this was something that I could do. I thought maybe if I majored in art, maybe a minor in art history, I could always learn art history and teach if I didn't ever learn how to do art. The thought of being an artist initially to me was grandiose, like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and I think that kind of put a damper on me wanting to say that I'm an artist. Once I thought about, well, there's artists all around that are doing their work. They have not achieved what Da Vinci or Michelangelo did, but they're still artists. So I saw them and said, well, that's what I'm doing also. My parents are interior designers, and they raised me with art all around, and were very supportive of me becoming an artist. My wife, she convinced me to go to art school. Kind of the connection with art for her and I initially when we were dating, I would make her these tapes and I would send them to her because we lived about 7 hours away from each other. So I'd make her tapes and I would draw little pictures on them. And so I was doing my art, but I didn't really know that that's something that I wanted to do. It was just, I was doodling. And she liked them, and they were nothing great, but she appreciated it. And she said, well, why don't you do something with your art? Why don't you do something with art? And it wasn't ever an option to me, even though I sort of admired or dreamed about what if I could be an artist. It wasn't a realistic thing at that time. I didn't see it as a career option. I was a little blocked in my vision of what I could be as a career. You know, that my children have inspired me in amazing ways, just in everything that they learn, I learn from them. It's taught me to grow as an artist. So my parents, my wife, and my children are absolutely my greatest current inspiration, and they always will be, even till they're grown up, I'm sure. I had a vision that I would get abstract as I got older. I had read about Picasso and saw Rembrandt's work, how they became more abstract, they became more textural and symbolic as they matured. And I knew that that was something that I wanted to do. I thought that doing realism at first was the best approach, to try to learn to paint life, to be able to see something and then copy that so that I can understand how light works, how color works, and then evolve. I always wanted to paint my dreams, and I couldn't figure out how to do this, it didn't make sense. And as I matured, I developed from doing figures, portraits, into doing figures in landscapes, and then the figures disappeared, and it was a landscape, then became an imaginary landscape, and then we have what we have today is these, chairs and trees and tree houses and things growing out of each other, and that is the development, sort of a imaginary metaphor for all the things that influenced my life. To be honest, I think the ancient civilizations probably have inspired me the most. Not in terms of painting itself, but in mystery, in imagination. I remember being in art history class and looking at the pyramids, looking at the Babylonians, the Greeks, different cultures, monuments, things like that. The mystery that they've left behind has inspired me in art. Of course, there's so many movements in art, and really studying all of them, been really inspired by so many. But I like the mystery in history. The first thing that I would do is an idea through a drawing. I'd do a drawing, complete a drawing, and then grid out the drawing and transfer that to a canvas. And that was a way that by the time I got to the canvas, I felt like I was already done. I felt like the idea was realized. I didn't need to paint it. So what's happened over the years is I have gone completely into imagination. What I do is I start with not even an idea. I just start with shapes on a canvas, and I develop that into whatever I see it becoming. I prefer to paint outside. If I could paint outside all year long, I would. Living in Southern California, it's too hot in the summer. The winter's perfect for that. But I like to be outside for the light. More than anything, that I'm actually capturing the proper light as I'm painting. I try to get the studio set up as close to that as possible, but it's nothing like natural light. With my work is based on this initial series of dreams that I had probably 25 years ago, and it ties through all the work. But a lot of it is from memory. I painted a lot of paintings plein air, and so I'm tapping into my memories about the way that light and color works in nature. So I don't really use photographs. It's pretty much from memory. A little bit more interested in nature than I am technology. If we lost a lot of our technology, I think I would be happier. I really just paint what comes out. I'm not trying, like, I need to paint birds, or I need to paint butterflies, or I need to paint guitars. There's something that is there that has to come out. And if I abandon one particular idea, that was just, it finished its course. I try not to think too much about what I'm doing. I just try to make the best paintings that I can. Well, I'd like to think that I'd be a musician, but that's another career that is also challenging. You know, I may possibly be in the sports medicine field or something, you know, something like that. But I can't say, you know, I mean, here I am as an artist, and I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Alright, that's it.
There's nothing else?
No. Good job.
Adios.